So welcome to another episode of Spiritual Shadow Boxing. This is actually our 8th episode, and we're really, really excited because today we're going to talk about gender essence and energetic identity. And essentially what that means is the various ways that people identify in the world in terms of their essence being aligned with their soul. And I am literally the most grateful to have Alex Francisco on with us today. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I just want to say, like, this little, like, 4 of you, 3 of you, well, I'll include myself, the 4 of us. It just brings me so much joy to have all of us in this container, because I am just so deeply grateful for each one of you. And I know some of you may have relationships with one another, but my relationship with Alex means the world to me. So I will let you do a little intro on your background and who you are, and we'll just get started.
My name is Alex Francisco. I am the coordinator of youth and young adult services at Rockland County Pride, but I have been a community organizer for the last 20 years. I started organizing when I was volunteering at Gay Men's Health Crisis in the mid to late 90s.
Amazing. And Kel, you pulled a card before we started recording. You want to share that with everyone?
So, I pulled 3. So, but the one that I think stood out for all of us, but I'll quickly talk about the first one, which was the emotional intelligence card. And to me, I think this represents the energy of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, which I think is so important in our conversation today. The second one is the child card. And as you can't see, you can't really, you cannot tell what gender this child is. And basked in white light with a flower, with a hummingbird sucking at the flower in her or his right hand, surrounded by sacred roses. And I think it's so beautiful. And the last card was a receiving of divine inspiration and your essence, if you want to say. So those were the 3 cards. So I would love to find out Alex, what you thought about those cards.
I think those are really great cards to pull for a conversation having to do with gender identity. Two-spirit beings are what Native Americans call the LGBTQ plus community. And to see both the divine masculine and the divine feminine represented in one, it's very affirming for the conversation that we're having. The child coming out and being a non-conforming or non-binary image. When I think of children, I think of divinity. I think the closest to God. And it allows for sacred space and sacred opening with the openness of childhood.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can get into some really, really good conversation about this topic. And then the receiving, you saw the card and she's letting the divine pour into her, which is the 3rd card.
The receiving, yes.
I think that when we have conversations like this, we're allowing the grander scheme of life, we're turning tides and just making sure that we all understand where we're all coming from.
Yeah. Would you do us the honor of telling us a little bit about your story, in terms of how you identified maybe as a child, maybe some of the things that were unknown to you or things that you struggled with, and then where you've essentially ended up at this moment?
Absolutely. So in the 80s, the different parts of the acronym didn't really exist too much. If you fell under the umbrella of an LGBTQ plus person, you were just considered gay.
Right.
So I knew that I was gay from very early. I think some of my furthest memories, I remember knowing that I was different. And I remember seeing trans women and effeminate gay men and knowing that they were what I was.
There was a resonance or like an identification.
there was an identification. I remember specifically this one trans woman. She would walk, and then when I would see her on the streets, I couldn't stare at her too long because she made me excited and scared.
Interesting.
And this was before I was double digits. I remember my father even asking me about her once. He goes, "What do you think of her?" And I didn't really have anything to say. I was terrified to even speak up about it.
Right.
But, I came out when I was 13 years old. And at that time, you know, there was no openly gay people.
Right.
You know, everyone that we know, and you know, Kelly can agree. We knew that we were there because we would see each other at school, but nobody was out. There came a lot of trials and adversities with being a 13-year-old who comes out, and I had to fight a lot. And this was an era where to be different meant that you were demonetized by everyone else around you. So I think that part of my life was really, really, and I know the word is going to be so weird, but magical because I was able to take a power that I didn't necessarily have prior to that. I learned how to take care of myself, even if it was just physically. I hadn't yet met myself emotionally or spiritually, but I was able to take care of myself in the most simple, which was physically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I went on to live very visibly in a time when a lot of people didn't, even in this town, because Nyack was very, you know, I used to come to Nyack a lot because this was the gay town, the gay village.
Right.
But even then, everyone still like went around in whispers.
Right.
You know, it was still very like cis heteronormative passing. You know, that was a big thing. Would you be able to go under the radar? Even while claiming your homosexuality. And you know, I remember just living life. I've lived life. I was like I said, I moved out into the city. I volunteered for a gay men's health crisis where I was able to do a lot of sex education for sex workers and just people in the life of Latinx and Black communities. And that was really, really amazing. That's really when I found myself and I was able to take care of myself emotionally and accept myself emotionally. I had a tribe that allowed me to experience myself in that manner with all of the ornateness that it is to be a queer person. And at that time, I realized that I was trans and I wanted to transition. And the closest to me were like, not yet. It's not time.
Because they weren't ready.
I thought that was the case, and I confronted them years later when I was going, you know, starting my transition again, and it wasn't because of their insecurities, but it was about the kind of surgeries that were out at the time made them fearful for me.
Okay.
And you know, I'm glad we had that conversation because that literally made everything so much easier. But then a number of years ago, I decided to start my transition again. And my transition, I decided to do it publicly first. And as of recently, I would say in the last 6 months, I have been chemically transitioning. And it's been, you know, quite the journey. It's been 39 years of queerness, 100%.
I love that. That's so.
It has been one of the most beautiful and magical things that I have ever experienced is to allow myself. So now I'm at the spiritual. Here I am at 39 years old, and I'm finally at the spiritual part of becoming and protecting and serving myself.
Exactly, of being. And you know, first of all, I want to, you know, thank you for being so courageous. You know, first to publicly express the change, and then actually going in and starting to work with, you know, with the body and the chemistry and what you need to do to finished the transformation, and it is a transformation. It's a transmutation almost. And I just wanted, to go back to the child card, because before we started, I went into a little bit of a meditation, and I asked Spirit and my guides, what is gender? Simple question for me, because
simple question.
Well, big question now, but big umbrella question, right? And if I can share a little bit, what they said to me, Jophiel and Uriel, some of my guides, they said, we are always both in spirits. We are always both. And at the singular point of conception, which brings me to the child card, and with the sacred geometry shape of the circle, which is the first before it becomes a child, we are both and we are nothing, right? And then as form develops, spirit will choose a form that has the highest potential of the integration of both the feminine and the masculine energy. So I know the word choose the form is going to maybe cause some people to really argue that point with me. I'm just the messenger right now of what I received. But I think the fluidity that is being born in the last few generations, the star seeds, they need less definition of form as we did in the past, right? This is what they said. Spiritually speaking, they are fluid in their ability to understand aspects of themselves as both feminine and masculine, where generations past, as we formed and we came into the container of our human form, we had to define ourselves by the human construct of language and definition. And because of the old paradigm shifting and dying, your generation and the generations right now, the last 3 generations, they had pushback. You guys have experienced the pushback of this old paradigm dying and the new paradigm of fluidity arising.
Right.
And so you were kind of caught in the crosshairs, basically. And they said that, it's the human language that judges, controls, wants to define. But once we move into a new paradigm, maybe we'll lose those words in our human language, because, the judgment that you must have faced and, the doubt and the anger. I can only empathize, is that the right one? Empathize and with what's going on. But I think that you guys are like the way showers. Is what I'm getting. You guys were in the crosshairs of
like that inflection point, what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So I think that, going back to the child card and understanding that, you knew at the time of your conception and birth that you had that fluidity and that allowed you to make these courageous decisions to be a way shower.
I would say it's less of a decision, just to focus on the verbiage for a second. Like, yes, courageous, 100%, but less of a decision in that it's really like almost like remembering. It's a courageous remembering of who you actually are, like what your truth is, right? Like, so there's only about a year difference between us, Alex, right? And so we went to middle school together, we went to high school together, and I remember seeing you, not in middle school, but in high school, which is when you were already out, right? Because I was a year ahead of you.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing you walk down the halls, and you may have gone by a different name at that time, but I remember seeing you walk down the halls and knowing that there was something different about you. And there was this light. We were not close friends at the time, but there was this light that literally just exuded from you as you walked down the halls. And there was something that I was so pulled toward, because you were sort of a way shower in that way. I didn't know that at the time, but it's all retrospective. I knew that I was uncomfortable in my skin. I was dating boys. There was no way I was going to be gay, but I was so uncomfortable in my skin, and I didn't understand why. But I saw you, and I saw there was one other guy who was out that was in my grade, and there was this same resistance that you were talking about with the trans woman who you saw walking down the street. There was this resistance of like, I can't look, like that story resonated so much with me because I remember looking at you like that and remember looking at this other person like that. And like, I can't look too long because there's something so familiar there, but it also scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, well,
So, I would love to add, to piggyback to what you both said. And it's, it's definitely not a choice. And for some, it's a remembrance of, but for some, it's also an acceptance of, you know, accepting who you are. You always know. I always knew. It was a matter of allowing myself to be.
Right.
And that was, you know, that was what it was. You know, can I allow myself to be this? How is it going to affect my world?
Right.
And and you're right, the last 3 generations have been a really amazing time of trailblazing and language being created. I think that has been absolutely magical to and for the representation of a lot of our community members.
Right.
Because there was no language. You know, we have always existed. We have always been. We're not new. We have been since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
But there was no language for us.
Right.
So
it's interesting too. There was so there's so much pushback on that, right? Like, so you have LGBTQIA now, and I saw some meme on Instagram one time and it said, every time y'all complain about how many different gender identifications there are, we just add 6 more. And I love that. I was like, yes.
I think that it's funny that we can make fun of ourselves in that manner, but it really has been, you know, working with our community, I've seen that being represented has literally provided such strength for some people. Right. You know, people who didn't.
I wanted to ask you about that, actually, what you just said about the language and, you know, how important it is. And you just kind of answered that question, you know, because as, you know, Kelly knows, we've had this conversation, and I define God or divine as all self. So non-gender, not he, that, or, you know, I believe in goddess aspect and goddess essence, and I believe in the God essence. But to describe like the singular source of all creation, I have named all self, you know, because I feel like, you know, and I think that we, like you just said, you've just all of a sudden, you've always been that spiritual being and that spiritual essence as you kind of try to kind of understand the physical container that you have now found yourself in, right? And that brings me back to reincarnation, and that we've had many lives. We live multidimensional selves in many timelines and many different genders. So it's like now here with our human mind and our human language, this is the only thing that we really can understand and be here now. Even though some of us are saying, like, you know, I understand that I may have had past lives, and I may have been a man or a female, but to understand here now in this body and understand the fluidity that everybody's both, you know, everybody's both. Yeah. And I think that, you know, the language, I do, you know, I look at the language, and as a spiritual person that spends a lot of time on that, I'm like, you know, to me, human language defines too much, and I don't like that definition. I don't like that we like to define things. So even with the new language, we're still defining. But I understand that it allows, allows recognition, and it allows being seen. And I see that's the importance of it. You know.
I want to chime in on that one. Yeah,
go ahead.
I wanted to chime in on that one because I think of the language creating a culture of allowance. Right. And then sense of belonging, and of course wanting to be seen, heard, valued. It's incredibly soothing. So whatever container allows for that is transformational, and it makes sense to me that there are people who are strengthened and fortified.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. And so, Kel, I think what you're talking about is more along the lines of either like identification from a, you know, lesbian, gay, bisexual, like those kind of identifications, but also from a pronoun standpoint, right?
Yeah,
Like that's the conversation that we've had in the past.
Yeah, it's about the pronoun situation, and it's about like, he, she, them, for me, it's like, you're a amazing, sparkling, spiritual being, and, so the pronouns to me, but I understand where, there's strength in that, and you're being recognized, and I understand the importance of that, and the importance of having people understand where you're coming from. But to me, I look at those as more just as a definition that we create as humans, and so I look at it a little bit different, but I don't want to be disrespectful, and I understand why they're important as well, but I'm just trying to share with you my point of view on that.
There's a lot of privilege that comes with being defined.
Yeah.
And when you define yourself for yourself, you don't allow for people to eat you alive. And that's loosely based on a quote by Audre Lorde. We need to be able to define ourselves. And through that, feel seen, feel affirmed, feel valued. We deserve that privilege also.
I think being seen is the most important thing. And I 100% agree with that,
So when somebody tells you who they are, at least they believe them.
Okay. Yeah.
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 Well, and I want to make the distinction between being labeled versus defining yourself, right? That there's sort of, there can be a victim stance to being labeled. You didn't have a choice in it. You didn't have agency. And when you get to define yourself and present who you believe yourself to be, that feels like deeply like authorship versus victim.
Right.
Yeah, and a perfect way of going about not victimizing somebody by doing that is just by asking them what their pronouns are. It's the simplest and easiest way to just show respect to someone else.
Mm-hmm. It's very disarming, right? Like, it's like, tell me how you identify. Tell me how I can best support you. Tell me how I can see you and speak to you in a way that gives you that visibility that you're craving, that belonging and that identification that you're craving, right?
Tell me who you are.
Tell me who you
Alex,
are.
what are your pronouns?
My pronouns are she, hers.
Yeah. It's just such an interesting conversation. And so maybe we could talk a little bit about, from the standpoint of the physical transformation, right? Like, so how does your soul essence, how do you, I mean, this is a question for you, Alex, and I can chime in as well, but like, what does your soul essence feel like? Like, how did you know that you wanted to transition your body?
So I love this question so much. I'm a woman. I've been a woman my whole entire life. I interact with humans in that way. I have never ever interacted with other humans with male energy. It doesn't exist. And I also want to bring up, before I go into chemical transition, that chemical transition doesn't validate somebody's trans experience. You do not need to go through a chemical experience to be a trans person.
Right.
But for me, it's important. It was important for me to visit, like, physically feel what I feel inside. That was important for me, and it's not for everybody. And it's a production. It's a process.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I can share that's like slightly resonant with that is that I didn't feel like I was born in the wrong body, and I didn't feel like I wanted to transition in terms of like wanting to present as male. But what I experienced was that my physical body that is outwardly facing female felt a little too female to me at 26 years old. And that's why I decided to have like an medically unnecessary breast reduction. And I remember being in the office and having the consultation with the doctor, and you know, I was only like a full C cup. Didn't have very large breasts, but she said, well, how small do you want to go? And I was like, as small as possible, like almost like take them off. I don't want this identification, because I was so resistant to this like idea of femininity that I had constructed in my mind from experiences that I had with my mother. So it was a really interesting thing for me. And then I could see on the doctor's face, like, hey, there might be something else going on. Like when you come in as a woman that doesn't need a breast reduction for medical purposes, she realized that there was something else going on. And I was like, no, it's okay. I thought she was going to not allow me to have the surgery. And I was like, no, it's fine. They can just be a little bit smaller, right? And so I went through with it, and I realized years later what was actually happening for me. And it was the fact that I was really rejecting this femininity. And now I'm really happy that I had it. But that fluidity, Kel, that you talked about earlier in terms of like your soul essence, how you present, I have gone through the entire spectrum of how I present on the outside. It was very masculine and very androgynous at one point, and now it's much more feminine. And
Yeah.
I think somewhere in the fluidity of that, I've like found myself, right?
I think
So
so.
everyone has a different experience is what I'm trying to say. And it doesn't matter whether you do something physically or chemically. You can identify with whatever you feel is truly you, as long as that feels like homecoming.
Exactly. And it's going back to the point of being seen. You know, I think that fluidity of like, you at one point were more masculine, and now you feel you're shifting more towards more feminine. And, you know, we all have both masculine and feminine energy. We cannot be human and incarnate in this form without both. There, you know, there will always be one that will be a little bit more, you know, I don't know how to use the word, dominated or dominant, you know, have more of domination of your persona and your personality. But we have to, it's part of how we are, you know, and the energetics of masculine and feminine are related to our brain and the right and left hemisphere of our brain, and how we think, act, see, feel, create, you know. So there is an integration. And I think that, you know, as we're learning about the fluidity of gender, again, it will help us with the fluidity of the divine, masculine, feminine, and energetic aspects too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's okay to fluctuate between the two, because I think where we're going as a human race is towards a fluidity. It's towards a non-gender, you know, it's towards this. And I think, you know, the languaging and all that defines and gives recognition, I think that might slowly not be as important, I feel, you know, because I think that it will be more of the norm, you know, because this is a changing of the guard in a way. This is a changing of an old paradigm, an old way of thinking into a new way of thinking. And I think as we move in, you know, what we call each other will be not as important to the ability of us seeing each other's souls and shining. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I'm trying to take it back to like, yes, we're spiritual beings in a physical body. How do we define our physical body? And how do we interact in the world? And how do we be seen, respected, and loved? You know?
Yeah, and I think in an attempt to, you know, share your shoes, Alex, I think I'm sitting here thinking I skew deeply feminine by nature, you know, obviously kick some ass in the masculine when I need to, but and then I'm in a woman's body. So like it has worked for me, but I'm thinking for how feminine I feel if I had been born in a male body, I can fully get the word you said, Kelly, homecoming. It's one of my favorite words. Like, if that doesn't feel like home, of course, come home. And I'm feeling deeply curious. I think as a coach who works with people to go from what I call a strategic north, who they think they have to be, to their true north, what that experience was for you, like what got you to,
that's beautiful,
this is who I am and I'm going to like shine that way.
Honestly, I think that it was going to happen anyway. my sense of self is strong, and it fought through everything, and it's currently still fighting through everything. There's always going to be something that comes up within your life that's going to make you question or doubt. And, you have to just give into it. I personally just gave into it. I said, I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to allow myself to just be who I am. I think, like I said, that allowance has literally brought me to a really magical place. It would have happened whether I wanted it or not.
Alex, I have a question for you. Earlier, you talked about that, you first did a physical experience is how you kind of showed the world first. And now you're going through the chemical process.
Yeah.
And then you said now you're tapping into that spiritual aspect of the experience. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. It's interesting. Before I decided to transition, you would probably see me walking down Main Street, all dolled up in the prettiest heels and the cutest little outfits, and a wig for every day of the week. When I decided to transition, I gave that all up.
Why?
Because that's not what a woman is. That's not, I don't have to put on heels. I don't have to put on pretty makeup and earrings and in order to be a woman. And it was funny because a lot of my friends were just like, no sense. But I was a woman, whether you saw it or not. Chemically transitioning is allowing me to be myself even more. It's very interesting. The chemical part of being a woman is very interesting. The aggression's gone, but the fight isn't. You allow yourself. I don't know how this works, but from what I've been experiencing, you allow yourself to pause more often.
Yeah, that's well said.
And take inventory in a way that I didn't before. So it's just the chemicals just bringing me to a part of womanhood that I did not know before.
I love that.
That's beautiful.
And the spiritual aspect, is that, do you see that's kind of the tip of the iceberg and the sense of everything that you're going through? Because you did kind of, like, I like to know a little deeper about how you're feeling it emotionally and physically, and now how do you feel it in your soul?
Oh, I completely feel it in my soul. Like, I am living my best life.
Yeah, you are.
Literally immersed in my being. I am very happy. But it's kind of like I don't have to shout or jump about it.
Yeah, I love that.
It's just
It just is.
It just
is.
It's because you're in a state of such knowing now.
Yeah, but I also
such a deep knowing, right?
I think it has a lot to do with my age also, because it's not like that for everyone. I was watching. I have a lot of young people ranging from 10 through 25 years old that I work with, and when I noticed with some of their transitions, is that it's different. And I think that it comes with age also. I feel like I'm glad that I am 39 years old and doing it now.
I'm so deeply touched both by how you shared, I guess, what the effects of the chemicals are to it's feeling like my female brain is being seen for how it operates. And I also, the fact that you are working with young people deeply touches me, because an ethos I've had is be who you needed when you were younger.
Absolutely.
And to know that they're getting a role model and I'll say a light shadow, someone to look up to during a challenging time is a profound gift in their lives. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also want to add to the conversation and sort of build on that. You're experiencing these more feminine aspects, right? These qualities of like pausing to take inventory and, like the aggression is gone, but the fight isn't. I love that line. I would say that it's possible. This is just my experience, my perspective. It's possible to do shadow work, to do self-development, to go into spiritual development realms and have that same experience without necessarily the chemical transition. I think from the external. I think you can do that internally, chemically, because I have noticed that. I lived a very, like, when I owned my company, my digital agency, I was very masculine in everything that I did. I was clearly a woman, but outwardly I looked androgynous. I presented more masculine. I pushed through. I didn't pause. I had that energy, right? And like going through this whole experience, which I'll call my spiritual transition, over the last 4 years, like I have only gone into the realms that you're describing, which is like being able to pause, being able to be still, being able to listen more deeply, being able to just be a fuller expression of my femininity, which was always there, but I tamped it down for so long, right? So something chemically is happening for me as well. So it's just interesting that we're having a similar experience, but through very different means, right?
Like, Kelly, can I ask you a question? Do you feel like when you had the business and you found yourself in that masculine energy quite a bit, do you feel you had to be in that to compete with the world around you and your business? Or do you feel like that was just, who you felt you were at that point? Because I think that our society really, as women, really push us to be much more masculine to achieve.
I think that, yeah, to answer that, it's a really good question, actually. I don't know that I've heard it asked that way before. I think that was probably true about 75%. If I had to apply a percentage, 75% of it was this like patriarchal realm that I was in, right? Like I owned a website design development digital agency, which was very masculine, like technology, innovation, and I had, many employees, and I felt like I had to be a good steward to them and all of that. So I did feel like I had to compete and push my emotions away because there were things to get done, and I was responsible for all of these people. And so, yes, I think 75% of it was that. I think the other 25% of it was I was still so unsure of who I was, and so much pushing away that femininity, that divine feminine, that thing that I just did not resonate with, and once I sold the company and started becoming more myself, game changer.
Well, because I was the same way, because, I've had my own photography business for a long time, and most photographers are men. It is pretty much a male dominated profession. So I found myself kind of being more masculine when I had to. There was a situation at a wedding where a videographer got into my face, and he saw Kelly from Worcester come out. He shouldn't be afraid of 6-foot Rupert behind me. He should be afraid of me, because I was just like, yeah, I'll rumble with you right now. Very masculine, very out there. And me personally, I think I go back and forth. I think I have a lot of masculine energy in who I am, but I definitely, I'm learning to pause. I think, to answer that question, probably 75% of why I'm like that is because I've had my own business. I've been out there, and you kind of have to a little bit, and learning how to pause, to take a deep breath, to listen, to receive, and then to act,
Yeah. Well, I would just challenge the notion that you have to be that way versus
I choose
had to be that way. I don't think that that's the case going forward.
No,
I think
not
you're seeing a lot more female leaders who are really embodying their feminine and realizing that the old paradigm that you talk about, the old way,
changing,
doesn't work, right?
Doesn't work.
That's why we've gotten into the situation we've gotten into in this world, right? Because what you're talking about and what I'm talking about here is more of either an immature masculine energy or a toxic masculine energy.
Yes,
it's not the divine masculine energy.
No, you're absolutely right. It is if you want to call it, I maybe prefer the word toxic because I don't like immature or higher or lower, because those are the words to divide, and they have polarity and that, sense of duality that we create in our world. So I'd rather use a word that says, even toxic is not good, but it's not the best use of our masculine energy. That's for sure. It's
Right.
again,
Undeveloped masculine, maybe.
undeveloped. Yeah, maybe.
Fareshta, do you have a
Fareshta,
better word for
come
us?
Well,
We need some words now. Come on, girl.
I do define the patriarchy as stunted boyhood turned into toxic masculinity.
Stunted.
So it's the faux male, like the faux masculine versus the healthy. Because I think of the masculine as being provisional, protective, generative, giving. And when it's not that, it's something stunted and undeveloped.
Like a
What I've learned,
pan.
what I've learned about oppressive behavior is that when you don't call it out by its name, it develops more into something a little more ugly. I think that toxicity within masculinity is something that is so prevalent. It's so very true. And for me, I feel like we have to be able to call a monster by its name.
I like that. Yeah.
I like that too.
And we were talking about politics a little bit. I hope and foresee that government.
Oh, we're going into a political.
That's one thing. Okay. Did I say? Well, I'm getting ready to see my family, so I got to be up for some political.
All right.
No, the only thing all I'm saying, I hope to see, as the paradigms change, government is ruled by both a male and a female at the same time. I think that I don't know how it would work. I see it in my mind's eye that, I think that, that singular ruling of countries, like by a president or minister or whatever, I think that's just an old way of thinking. I think it needs to be a representation of both female and masculine. And I don't know how that would work, but I think that would be a great way of starting, something different.
Yeah. So, Alex, I know, and that I am completely obsessed with hearing you sing, because it brings me so much joy and it brings such a smile to my face. And we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, but would you do us the honor of singing something for us?
So it would be my honor also to sing something for you. It's just going to be one little line, and I decided that it's going to be a Cinderella song.
Okay, whatever makes you happy.
To be happy too.
No matter how your heart is screaming, if you keep on believing, the dreams that you wish will come true.
I love that
Thank
song.
you.
It's a great song.
Such a great song.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else that you would like to, in the realm of visibility and expressing your soul essence, is there anything else that you'd like to leave us with?
Absolutely. If you don't mind, I would like to just invite anyone who is watching this, who is of queer identity, or who has a family member or a friend of queer identity who doesn't have a sense of community or is having a rough time finding guidance in any aspect of their lives. I would like to invite them to come, or actually not come because we're in a pandemic, but to call Rockland County Pride Center. You can find us on the web, and leave a message, and we'll get back to you, and we'll help with whatever and however we can help. Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. This is a great talk.
I'll send you pictures of these so you all have them.
Okay. Thank you.